turn off my radio. All right, I think we're all set. All right, Jason, I think we're good to go.
All right. Good evening, everybody. I call this July 14th, 2020 meeting of the Board of Zoning Appeals to order. Board of Zoning Appeal members are volunteers. We receive no compensation. We are appointed by the City Commission for staggered 3-year terms. Under state statutes, the BZA hears 3 types of appeals. Dimensional or non-use variances, including side variances. In those cases, the appellant must show a practical difficulty complying with dimensional requirements of the ordinance. That requires 4 affirmative votes. And I believe all of our cases are non-use variances or dimensional variances tonight. We also hear use variances and appeals of interpretation or rulings of the building official or other boards regarding any provision of the zoning ordinance. And again, we don't have any of those before us tonight. This is our 4th virtual meeting under the state's new guidance. And for the benefit of tonight's meeting, I would ask that we follow some basic parliamentary procedures. First, all speakers must be acknowledged by the chairperson prior to speaking. Board members can do this by physically raising their hand in their screen. For members of the public, we ask that you use the raise hand feature within Zoom at the appropriate time. Please note that if you dialed into the meeting, you can raise your hand by dialing *9 on your phone. Let me repeat that. If you dialed into the meeting, you can raise your hand by dialing *9 on your phone. Second, we keep our comments succinct and to the point for the benefit of a productive meeting. Third, all voting will be done in the form of a roll call vote. Fourth, when a member of the public is recognized, the member of the public will be unmuted and will be asked to state his or her name and address before speaking. I ask for your patience, cooperation as we handle tonight's business, and thank you in advance for this. One more note regarding our procedure. We're going to start by having city staff make a presentation. City staff will take questions from board members. We'll then invite the appellant to present his or her case. We ask that only one person be allowed to address the board on behalf of the appellant. In instances where we need some technical support, we may grant exceptions. After that, we will open it up to the public. We ask that the members of the public come forward with the procedure I just outlined. Again, identify themselves, provide their comments to the board. We will then close the public hearing, entertain motions from board members, and then vote on those motions. In all cases, this is not a popularity contest. Granting or denying a variance is based substantially on the appellant meeting his or her burden of proof. Secretary, can you please call the roll of the board members?
Charles Lilly. Jason Canvasser.
Here.
Kevin Hart. Richard Lilly.
Yes, here.
John Miller. Eric Morganroth.
Here.
Francis Rodriguez.
Here.
Jerry Attia. Ron Reddy.
Good evening. Here.
And was John Miller actually here?
I was muted. Yes, I am here.
Okay, that's okay.
So we have a quorum tonight. I'm now going to call the roll of the appellants. Our first appeal tonight is for the property at 1165 Hillside, appeal number 20-28. Is anybody present for that? I believe I see Mr. Nieper.
It's probably muted.
Yeah. Mr. Nieper, can you raise your hand or can we unmute him so we can confirm he's present?
I am here. Thank you.
Okay. Our next appeal is 280 Mill Race, appeal number 20-31.
Mike Coakley here.
Great. Our next appeal is 545 West Brown, appeal number 20-32.
Larry Bryce here.
Thank you. Our next appeal is 593 South Glenhurst, appeal number 20-33.
Rick Wyand here.
Thank you. And our last appeal tonight will be 691 Oak, appeal number 20-34.
Yes, hello. It's Gina Greer and Hoyt Frerichs, owners
Great.
of 691 Oak.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Johnson, do we have any additional correspondence for the board?
Do not.
Okay. Board members, before you are the minutes of the last regular scheduled meeting. Does anybody have any corrections, revisions? Want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion
Mr. Richard Lilly.
to accept the minutes as presented.
Second.
See a second from Mr. Morganroth. Please call the roll.
Richard Lilly,
Yes.
Eric Morganroth,
Yes.
Francis Rodriguez,
Yes.
Ron Reddy,
Yes.
Jason Canvasser,
Yes.
John Miller.
All right, thank you. All right, moving to our appeals. First appeal tonight is 1165 Hillside, appeal number 20-28. Mr. Zilke will be speaking on behalf of the city.
Jeff Zilke here to present case 20-28. Property known as 1165 Hillside requests the following variances to construct a single-family home with a detached garage. Chapter 126, Article 2, Section 2.08 of the zoning ordinance requires that a minimum front yard setback be the average of homes 200 feet in each direction. The required front yard setback is 53.20 feet. The proposed is 41.20 feet. Therefore, a 12-foot variance is being requested. Variance B, Chapter 126, Article 4, Section 4.75A1 of the zoning ordinance requires that a private attached single-family residential garages must be set back a minimum of 5 feet from the portion of the front facade on the first floor of the principal building that is furthest set back from the front property line. The proposed garage is 2.33 feet in front of the furthest facade. Therefore, a variance of 7.33 feet is being requested. The applicant was in front of the board last month, and it was tabled till this month to get some clarification on the site plan, and what you see in front of you right now. The area shaded in blue is the area of the front yard setback that's being requested of the 12 feet. The line in the back, the end of the blue up to the top of the screen is the required front yard setback. And then the 12 feet going out in front is what the variance is asking for, that area in blue. The area in yellow is the portions of the front facade that actually sit. The one on the left sits behind the portion of the front of the garage. So therefore that variance is 7.3 feet. 3 feet is being requested. And if we go to the next screen, here's a survey of the area of all the surrounding houses, which was asked to be presented tonight, and kind of showing the relationship of the houses across the street opposed to the same side of the street. And with that, is there any questions you have?
Mr. Morganroth?
Jeff, I appreciate this colored site plan. It's great. The 41 feet that Mr. Nieper or whomever did this, that's identified for the building envelope that obviously isn't representative of where the front setback is. What is that line representing? If not for the averages of the home, that's where it would be?
That I'm not sure if we can pull the screen back up.
Yeah, so there's a 41-foot dimension that obviously the house is fitting within. And I'm wondering what that hypothetical line is. The 41. So see the line that runs through the word porch almost. He's fitting the house within that envelope. What envelope is that he's drawing the house with?
That 41.2 feet is what he's proposing to set the front yard setback as. Front porches can project 10 feet into the required front yard, and the variance
Right.
asking for that 41.2, where the required is the 53.2.
So he's creating his own front setback. It's not that line would be there if not for something else.
Correct. That's what he's proposing as the required front yard.
Okay. I didn't know if it was between here's the front setback and here's where it would be. And then you also have to go by the averages. And so it's pushed back. That's just not the case. It's just a line he created.
Right. That's where he's proposing to be the new proposed required front setback, or the proposed front yard setback.
Okay. And then if you can explain for me just the yellow shaded area on the far side of the home, is that the offset that we're basing the distance off of? The first offset?
Right, that's the furthest portion. The way the ordinance says, garages have to set back 5 feet from the portion of the front facade, furthest from the front elevation, which that portion is the farthest portion of the facade that sets back. With the garage, if you drew a line parallel across, is 2.33 feet in front of that. And therefore 5 feet makes it the request for the 7.33 foot variance. Because the garage is supposed to set 5 feet behind that portion of the front facade. And with that portion setting 2.3 feet behind the garage, so then adding the 5 feet beyond that, that's where the 7.33 feet is being.
So if he extended that offset on the closet artificially forward, would that help or no?
On the closet,
the walk-in closet of the master where that yellow starts.
if he extends it forward, it would help, but then you're going to put it in the required side yard to meet this total side yard.
Oh, right, because he can't go further forward. Right. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Zilke, I'm looking at the vicinity map. And is there room to move the house back any farther?
It is actually touching the 30-foot required rear yard setback.
Okay. It's kind of hard to tell. Yeah. So it is touching.
The lighter dashed line on here, that's the existing house as it sits currently. That's sitting today. And that back line is the required 30-foot rear setback. And with this new proposed house, he's pushed it all the way back to that 30-foot rear setback and trying to meet up the lot coverage area. And that's where it kind of pushed that house forward in asking for the variance for the front yard.
So the current house does stick into the front setback, but not nearly as much as what he's proposing here, correct?
Right. The front yard pretty much at the 41.1 feet sits pretty much where it's being asked to take the new house to, but with it being extended out across the whole facade is actually bringing the house considerably forward into that front yard opposed to what it is existing.
Okay. Mr. Reddy.
I had a similar question to you, Mr. Canvasser. Jeff, I'm wondering, the 30-foot setback in the rear, is that as large as it is? Because this is a kind of a corner lot. It's not quite a square corner, but it's definitely on the junction of two streets here.
Yeah, with the address being on Hillside, the backyard would be behind it, and it's kind of with it being odd shaped. That's where that detached garage is sitting. That's the rear. The side is actually facing the house to the north, and then green lawn would be the other side, the street side. and that's where the garage is pushed to 15 feet with the garage doors facing green lawn. So we're trying to build within the envelope. That's trying to maintain the 30-foot rear setback and being mindful of the side yard setbacks.
Okay, because I also thought the variance in the rear might be a better option as well. Thank you.
Oh.
Mr. Morgenroth.
Jeff, one other question. The depth of the garage that's attached to the home is about 24 feet and some change. If that garage were, let's say, 22 and pulled off the front, would that almost close to eliminate the need for that variance on that side? Or at least the variance of the proximity of the garage to the front door?
No, the second variance? You talking about the width of the garage?
I'm talking about, the width of the garage, right?
The width of the garage, if you take 2 feet off of that, puts it in line, you still will need basically a 5-foot variance because you're still got to be 5 feet behind that portion where it's at if it becomes parallel with it. So you still be an issue with the side yard, that little portion on the left side. So that variance will still be needed.
But just lesser.
Right. Basically, where it sits, you would have to remove 7.33 feet of that garage to make that comply with that portion of it.
Right. So maybe a single bay garage would work with the other garage, or, all right. Just want to understand the possibilities. Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Miller.
Yes, the adjacent house to the north, it appears that it's, too far back in terms of a 30-foot setback from the rear yard, and also kind of crowding the property line of this proposed property, that it's a little bit outside the envelope of zoning there, that existing house on lot 65.
Correct. The back corner of the garage and the side of the garage.
Yeah. So if that house was ever going to be rebuilt, it couldn't be built where it sits without getting a variance.
Correct.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the board? Mr. Lilly.
Would it be possible to, and it may not be an ideal situation, but could you make the attached garage almost a one-car garage and then make the additional freestanding garage a two-car garage? In other words, you could shrink the garage and get rid of the blue and eliminate the variance and bring it forward, bring the north wall forward and maybe have enough room for a two-car garage. It's a thought.
I don't think it'll eliminate the required front yard, the front yard variance that they're asking for. It could potentially eliminate the second variance of the portion of the garage not set back from the furthest portion of the front facade.
Right.
I think it still would be a question of how to get rid of that required front yard.
Okay.
Anyone else from the board? All right. Thank you, Mr. Zilke.
You're welcome.
Who is going to speak on behalf of the petitioner?
Good evening. My name is Brian Nieper, 630 North Old Woodward. We're here tonight because of the practical difficulties caused by this unique size and shape on this corner site, and also the unique past development of the three homes to the north on the hillside. The homes at 1147, 1135, and 1119 have front yard setbacks of 72.1, 70, and 57.5. Therefore, the average front setback has been skewed to a large average of 53.2. Each of these three sites to the north are at least 3,500 square feet larger in square footage, and they're each up to 55 feet deeper in depth than our site at 1165 side. We have calculated the average front setback for each of these three sites as if it were to be redeveloped today to assess the current allowable building footprint of each site. The results further illustrate the greater restrictions the zoning ordinance puts on 1165 Hillside without a variance when compared to the sites to the north. The house just to the north at 1147 has a non-conforming rear yard setback of over 4 feet, and it also has the largest existing front setback at 772.1 feet. When reviewing the average front yard setback for this same site, the average came to 39.9 feet, while the buildable footprint area came to 8,045 square feet compared to just 3,311 square feet for our site. After reviewing design concepts with the building department, we are proposing to maintain the front yard setback established by the existing home on the site, which is 41.1. We went through many design iterations for this site. We had to abandon the design goals that we initially had for a 3-car attached garage. We abandoned the formal dining spaces while condensing the plan and mitigating the amount of projection into the front yard beyond the 53.2 foot average. Our design fits the 2-car attached garage into the wedge of the site to open towards green lawn. In order to reduce the massing of the home along hillside, we've articulated the plan design to move in and out and have included a low covered porch. The garage massing has been minimized in the design at the front face while mitigating the amount of the house that extends forward of the average required setback. Therefore, we have 2 areas that do not extend 5 feet in front of the garage. The garage cannot move to the rear as it is pinned into the wedge created by the side and rear yard setback. We're very careful to respect the rear yard setback and all the side setbacks. This design only uses 26% of the lot coverage. This is one of the smaller sites on hillside, and the home will be a smaller home than all the recent new built homes on the opposite side of hillside. The proposed home is 3,194 square feet. The building height is only 26.5 feet, well below the maximum height. The house design is set to properly face hillside, which I believe is consistent with the spirit of the zoning ordinance and the urban planning concepts of a walkable community. The position of the home's side being exposed to the neighboring front yard is a common occurrence along Fairway and North Lawn within this neighborhood, where the streets are not straight or perpendicular with respect to the site. I believe strict enforcement of the ordinance on this site would result in unnecessary hardship, creating a practical difficulty to develop a home of a size that is relative to the size of the site. The resulting footprint of the home would be a narrowing wedge. The average front yard setback requirement eliminates roughly 950 square feet of the buildable area, which is roughly 7%, which would reduce our home to roughly 20% lot coverage. Again, we believe it's the unique size and shape of the site in relationship with the extreme front yard setbacks to the north that have caused our practical difficulties. Thank you.
Thank you. What did you say the square footage of this house was?
It's 3,194.
I'm sorry, say it one more time. I'm having trouble hearing.
3,194.
And what's the square footage of the existing home or the former home? If you know.
Available. I think all those older branches were roughly around 1,900 square feet.
Is it possible to build a home on this lot without the need for a variance?
It wouldn't be the marketable home that my client is looking for.
Okay. Board members, any questions? Mr. Morgenroth?
So, Mr. Nieper, I'm going to make a bunch of comments, and then maybe you can just reference them, mostly about the layout. First of all, I think it's a great layout. I think you did a great job. If you look at most of the blue massing that's outside the front yard setback, you've got the library placement, you've got the powder room on the front of the home, you've got the library positioned, the laundry room positioned all within that blue area. And then you have a garage that in my mind is slightly larger than it needs to be. Probably couldn't still do a 2-car garage and get it down to the size that it would have to be. But I think the concept of a 1-car garage and the separate garage being a 2-car, if that were feasible, would be a solution to that. I think I see what is likely a prep kitchen next to the kitchen, which is a great design. But if the laundry room had been put in that position and the library had been relocated, you'd be asking for lesser of a variance. The front porch can extend in, and even if you needed a big foyer, because the great room obviously is large, I feel like there would have been ways to mitigate how much you're asking for. You really don't have one spot on the front of the home that you aren't asking for a variance. Whereas if you had a couple spots just sticking into the front yard setback, it might show some attempt at mitigation. But otherwise, I think it's a great layout, and I do think there are some challenges with this lot. I think there's some challenges with the shape of the lot, and in a perfect world, I think it's a great house for that lot, notwithstanding the degree of variance. Can you kind of address that overall theme of what I'm describing and kind of some kind of response?
Yeah, I think we have tried to reduce the amount of the house that came forward, and also in the meantime trying to balance the requirement of keeping the house 5 feet in front of the garage, having the garage kind of pinned up against the rear yard setback. I don't like the idea of having a 1-car attached garage for the market of this home, and the size of the lot. I think it warrants a 2-car garage. It's really just that balance of trying to stay in front of the garage and being pinned to the back.
Right, but seeing the generosity of how big the master suite is and the bathroom and the closet at 15 feet, and knowing that you place the library on the front of the home, and I guess I get all those in an ideal scenario and a lot that it works. I'm just wondering why the laundry room is sticking into the front yard setback when you have a prep kitchen, and whether or not there was some consideration of mitigation relative to the lot, what the lot can hold versus what you've designed, notwithstanding you're obviously at the demand of what your client wants. But we're here to determine what variance is appropriate, if any.
The laundry room was a design element that I brought forward intentionally to try and hide the garage and try and minimize any design element of the garage. I'm just trying to minimize that impact.
Right.
I know we're as the city is trying to minimize the garage front, any effect that garages have on the front elevation. So, that was intentional to try and hide the garage.
I mean, you're touching the back line on lots of parts of the home, so I think that's great. There's obviously some dead space that could have been incorporated into the design, but not ideal locations. So we'll have to hear what all the other board members say. But otherwise, I think it's a great design, notwithstanding this.
It's really
this issue.
that wedge shape, just trying to. It creates a lot of steps into the house to try and wedge it in without.
Right.
Angling.
I mean, obviously, our issue is we know you have a blank building envelope. You can design whatever you want. It seems like most of this design is designed without consideration of what can be built. So now we have to decide if we think it's, if there's enough practical difficulty to justify the amount of variance. But thank you.
Right. Thank you.
Anyone else from the board have questions for Mr. Nieper? All right. Thank you. Does anybody from the public wish to speak on this appeal? I don't believe I see any hands raised. Board members, anybody want to make a motion? Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Miller.
Yeah, I see us as possibly having a split decision here. So I would like to start out by a motion for approval on Appeal 2028, looking at item A. I believe that this problem was caused by the unusual alignment of the adjacent homes and the unusual shape of the lot in combination. Generally, we provide accommodation. A lot of times, if a lot is on a corner, that causes some problems that we've encountered before. Number two, if a lot is irregular, this certainly is. And number three, if a lot next door is out of zoning alignment and causing part of the problem. And in this case, we've checked all three boxes. The one corner of the house on the south side does align with the existing house, even though it varies out from there. But as I look across the street and in the general neighborhood, the proposed house is not out of character with the neighborhood, other than the certainly the adjacent house, which is outside of the zoning envelope, and the two others, which are unusually far back on the lots. So for those reasons, I would move to approve Part A of this appeal and tie it to the plans as submitted.
Mr. Miller, are you, real quick, Mr. Morganroth, is your motion, just for clarification, to approve A and deny B, or you're just taking up A only?
I'm just taking up A only.
Okay.
I think probably a separate discussion on B might be afforded here.
Okay. Mr. Morganroth, are you seconding that?
I am, with a caveat that I'm not sure that if we don't approve B, that we can really approve the encroachment when it's going to change, or it'd have to change if B wasn't approved. So I guess I'd come back to you, Mr. Chairperson, and say, how do we, if we consider B and it gets denied, which would change the blue section potentially, how do we approve A when A is encroaching too? I guess that might be the lesser of the area that's encroaching.
Okay. Why don't we take up A, because it sounds like we have a motion to approve A in a second. Why don't we open that up for discussion, and the motion will not address B at this point, and we can deal with that through a separate motion.
Okay.
Is that all right, Mr. Miller? It's your motion. Okay. All right, so the motion is to approve A only. It's been seconded by Mr. Morganroth. Board members, any discussion? Mr. Rodriguez?
Yeah, I'll also support the motion. I do think there are unique circumstances, particularly the three sites to the north that are skewing the front setbacks and the unique size and shape. So for those reasons, and the ones already stated, I would approve A.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, I'm also going to support A. This is a very uniquely shaped lot. So I think we certainly have unique circumstances of the property. And I would agree with some of the other reasons that have been stated. Anyone else have any comments on this? All right, can we please call the roll?
John Miller?
Yes.
Eric Morganroth?
Yes.
Francis Rodriguez?
Yes.
Ron Reddy?
Yes.
Jason Canvasser?
Yes.
Richard Lilly?
Yes.
All right, so the motion passes. Variance A is approved. Does somebody want to make a motion relative to the request for variance B? Mr. Miller?
Yes, I was a little more conflicted on B than I was on A, obviously. I wasn't sure where my colleagues' concerns might be, which is why I separated the two. But I am moving to approve B also at 116520, item 2028 on Hillside. I think here again, because of the unique character of the lot, also the garage is turned to the side, which takes a little bit of the onus off of having a garage door facing the front. And the garage, doesn't protrude as far forward as a lot of elements of the house. So I think that mitigates it. But mostly because the site really necks down, gets much smaller on that side where the garage is. It's the obvious location for the garage. So for those reasons, and I think the location of the garage and the orientation would do substantial justice to the neighborhood in terms of coming off instead of on Hillside, it comes off on Green Lawn. So for those reasons, I would move to approve, tied to the plans as submitted, and that is for Part B on case 2028.
Mr. Rodriguez?
I second.
All right, so motion to approve by Mr. Miller, seconded by Mr. Rodriguez. Any comments, discussion? Mr. Morganroth?
Although I appreciate all of Mr. Miller's perspectives on why he is suggesting an approval, I can't support the motion. I see that the possibility of getting functional garage space is available on the property, even connected garage space. This garage just is too far forward, and I think the ability to do a oversized single and maybe a double off the building envelope is feasible. And so to provide a variance for something that on a blank sheet of paper could be designed to accommodate garage space, it would be difficult for me to support the motion.
Mr. Ruddy?
I agree with Mr. Morganroth on variance B. I think the better plan might be to grant a variance to the rear as opposed to granting a variance in the front. With regards to 30-foot setback in the rear, I think kicking it back 5 feet is a better option than giving the variance here.
Any further discussion? Okay, please call the roll.
John Miller,
Yes.
Francis Rodriguez,
Yes.
Ron Reddy,
No.
Jason Canvasser,
Yes.
Richard Lilly,
Yes.
Eric Morganroth.
No.
All right, motion passes. So both variances are approved. Thank you.
Congratulations.
All right, moving to our second appeal of the night, 280 Mill Race Appeal 20-31. Mr. Zilke?
Jeff Zilke with the city, here to present case 20-31. Property known as 280 Mill Race. Request the following variance to renovate an existing non-conforming home. Variance A, Chapter 126, Article 4, Section 4.61A2 of the zoning ordinance requires that a corner lot shall have a minimum setback from the side street of 15 feet for permitted attached garages with vehicle entry doors facing the side street. The proposed is 8.2 feet. Therefore, a variance of 6.80 feet is being requested. The applicant proposes to renovate this existing non-conforming home on this irregular lot. As you see on the site plan, on the right corner of the existing garage is 8.2. And what the existing garage comes in from the side, and they're looking to propose to put the doors on the front of that garage, which you can see on the next plan. You zoom in, you see the garage doors. They're filling them in. They're proposing to fill them on the upper portion of it. Bring them over there to the left. And on here it has 8.9 feet back where the garage doors are, but that corner of the garage is at the 8.2, which gives us to the variance of the 6.8 feet being requested. And do you have any questions?
So the current existing garage doors, if they were left in place, would that require any variance?
No, it would not, because the existing home, they are also proposed to put an addition on the other portion of the house, which still meets all the ordinances. I think we lost,
We lost your screen share. I don't know if you meant to do that or not.
if they didn't change the doors, they wouldn't, because that portion of the house would have been left alone. And on top of that portion of the garage, there was going to be an eyebrow window where it would have been some modifications to the existing wall. So there wouldn't be a variance that was needed. But with adding the doors to it, which doesn't set that one upper right corner, the 15 feet back for the doors facing the street on the street on Baldwin, I believe.
Any other questions from the board? Don't believe I see any. All right, thank you. Who's going to speak on behalf of the petitioner?
Mr. Chairman, as Mike Copley, good evening, everyone. And with me this evening is my wife, Beth. Yeah, start the video. Let me do that. There you see us. Okay. And also joining us is Glenda Needs, who is our architect. And I believe David Gans, our builder, is also on, and they're joining us in the event there are any technical questions that I can't answer for you. We've detailed the reasons we requested this variance in our letter to the board, and so I'm not going to repeat all of that, but I would like to hit a couple of highlights. The primary reason that we're asking for a variance is the unique and challenging shape of this lot. If it wasn't a pie-shaped lot, had a parallel line on it, we wouldn't need any variance. But because it tapers or narrows to the east, then the existing garage is into the setback requirement. It is a corner lot, so we have 2 front yards, so it has a lot of unique characters to it that make it challenging. We are going to put in a small addition, but as Mr. Zilke mentioned, even with that small addition, the structure would be in conformity in all respects. But it does take up some of the green space in the backyard. And if you remember one schematic he showed, it shows an awfully large asphalt area. And our idea was in relocating the doors to the north side, we could recapture all of that asphalt and create a great deal more green space on the property. There isn't any change to the footprint of the garage with our proposal. And the other aesthetic that it does is we have removed a utility pole that was in front of that north side of the garage, moved it back to the east boundary of the lot line. And I could tell you that cost us a pretty penny to do that. And I know that our neighbor to the north, who would be looking out on the north side of the property, was very happy with us that we took that out of his sight line. When we purchased the property and plan to renovate it, we plan to keep the existing footprint and didn't anticipate or didn't want to have to request any variances, but in order to achieve our other goal of increasing the green space and open space on the property, it did require that we move those garage doors to the north side to get that green space. Now, having the garage doors on the north side facing the street, it's going to it not only increase the green space, but it's going to improve the maintenance because we have a much shorter driveway there. But even with that, it's not going to change the existing traffic flows because you would still be turning south into the garage just like you would if you use the existing garage doors today. And I think importantly there's no sidewalk along there. There's not even a curb on that side of the property. So there isn't any pedestrian traffic that we have to be concerned about. And so I think, that means that our requested variance would be in compliance with any public safety concerns. We also think that the requested variance it honors the spirit of the ordinance that requires the 15-foot setback, in that we understand that to be primarily concerned with having the garage offset from the main structure, and as it is now, and that was a requirement of 5 feet. So we add 5 feet to the 10-foot required setback, and that's how you get to the 15. As it is now, the garage is offset from the house by more than 12 feet. So we more than meet the spirit of the ordinance and the purpose of the ordinance by moving those doors to the north side. And we, it will do substantial justice to us. Yes, as my dog giving his warning. It would do substantial justice to us. It'll do substantial justice to the public, and it'll do substantial justice to our neighbors. We will gain significant green space, which will be in keeping with the public spaces around. There's a park, and so increase the green space for the public and also for our neighbors. Our neighbors support this request, and we've had no objections. In fact, one letter, we sent 2 letters of support. One is from the Suliches, who are directly across the street north. They would be the ones who are facing the north-facing garage, and they're fully supportive of this, and in fact enthusiastic about our having moved the telephone pole and creating more green space on the property. So we've asked for the absolute minimum variance that we could in order to accomplish our goals for this property. We're putting a lot of money into renovating it. It's being completely gutted, and hopefully we'll have a lovely home for the neighbors to look at when we're finished. So with that, we thank you for your attention to our request and request that you've read it. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. You mentioned a good amount about the green space. Is there an issue with exceeding lot coverage right now that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
No, I think we meet all those requirements.
Okay. And you could still build your proposed addition even if those garage doors stay where they're at, correct?
We could, but that will take up a great deal of green space in the backyard, and so.
And there's a guy.
Oh yeah, and since I've had the telephone pole or the utility pole moved, there's now a guy wire that anchors right in the middle of that driveway. And I'll tell you, it cost me $20,000 to move that pole.
Okay.
Our neighbors were.
All right, board members, any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Anyone from the public wish to comment? Don't believe oh, I do see a hand from an Akil Gulati.
Yeah. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
So I live at 190 Millrace and just down the street from them, about 4 houses down. But I want to kind of give my support to this for these guys, because we walk by there every day, and I will tell you, it just looks like half that entire lot is just asphalt and driveway, and it does not look good in the neighborhood, especially in that corner with Randall and Lakeside and the Millrace there. It's a very visible area. Everyone walks by it every day in our entire street, and it just doesn't look good. And I'm excited about the increased green space and what they can do with it potentially. So just wanted to voice our support from down the street.
Thank you. All right, anybody else from the public wish to comment? I think I see a hand from a Brian Hawk.
Hi, yes, I own 251 Baldwin and frequently pass this residence, and just wanted to echo the other neighbors' comments that I think this would be a significant improvement for the overall neighborhood. And I don't know how frequently the board members have driven on Randall Court or Lakeside, but if you're headed west, you can given the irregular shape of their lot, you can basically see right into their garage right now. If you're headed west on Randall Court going on to Lakeside. And I think that by moving the garage facing north, it would be much more visually appealing. And given the setback from the house, if you're headed southeast on Lakeside, you can't really see the garage given the significant setback. So I think it would be a great improvement, and I actually wrote a letter voicing my approval and wanted to reiterate that for the board. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public wish to comment? Don't believe I see anyone. All right, thank you. Board members, anyone want to make a motion? Mr. Rodriguez.
For case 20-31, I would move to approve the variance and tie it to the plans as submitted. In this case, I do think a practical difficulty was established given the unique circumstances of the irregular pie-shaped corner lot. I do think the appellants are requesting a variance that's the minimum necessary as they're indeed not increasing the garage size. I don't believe that granting the variance will adversely affect adjacent properties, so I would move to approve.
Second.
I think Mr. Morgenroth, you're the second. Any comments? Mr. Morgenroth.
Just quickly, I think Mr. Coakley did a great presentation. I appreciate the reduction of the amount of impermeable driveway surface by moving the garage and creating the greater green space. I think that adds substantial justice to the neighborhood and to them. And being that the existing non-conforming garage is not being increased in its non-conformity, I think that this makes sense for the applicant as well as the neighbors. So I'll support the motion.
Anyone else? I'm also going to support the motion. I think this is one where there is a little bit of an argument as to whether or not this is self-created or not in terms of whether or not it's truly necessary. But I understand why the applicants want to do what they're doing. And I think it certainly does substantial justice to the neighbors. And there's definitely no question that there's unique circumstances of the property. So I will support the motion. Anyone else? Okay, please call the roll.
Francis Rodriguez,
Yes.
Eric Morganroth,
Yes.
Ron Reddy,
Yes.
Jason Canvasser,
Yes.
Richard Lilly,
Yes.
John Miller.
Yes.
Congratulations, you have your variance. Thank you. All right, moving to our third appeal of the night, Mr. Zilke.
Jeff Zilke here to present case 20-32, property known as 545 West Brown. Request the following variance to construct the second floor addition on the rear of an existing non-conforming home. Variance A, Chapter 126, Article 2, Section 2.10 of the zoning ordinance requires that a minimum rear yard setback is to be 30 feet. The proposed is 13.56 feet. Therefore, a variance of 16.44 feet is being requested. Variance B, Chapter 126, Article 2, Section 2.10 of the zoning ordinance requires that a minimum combined front and rear setback is to be 55 feet. The proposed is 30.35 feet. Therefore, a variance of 24.65 feet is being requested. The appellant is proposing to construct a second floor addition on the existing non-conforming home. The home is a single family residence, which is allowed in the zoning ordinance, which this is actually in an R8 zoning district, but to be a single family, it's got to go meet the R3 zoning requirements. There was a variance that was granted back in 1981 with the existing garage being the 8 feet off the rear of the property line. And this appellant, it was in front of the planning board last week, and they had unanimous approval on their support of this variance moving forward. And if you can see on the site plan, there's also overhead wires, which there's a easement for the DTE at 7.5 feet, which you can kind of see over on the left corner on the kind of the reverse C of the retaining wall as the line goes across. The existing garage sits at 8.15 feet or 8 foot off the rear lot line. And if you go to the floor plan and you can kind of see it a little bit better with the addition in the shaded area, and you can see the 7.5 foot power line easement. They're holding it back, meeting the DTE clearance, the power lines, the existing garage. As it sits, it extends 5.5 feet further back. The existing garage, and they're just adding the second floor addition to the front, above on the rear, which is why we're there for the variances that are being asked tonight. And do you have any questions?
Mr. Morganroth.
So, Mr. Zilke, the addition is going to be going over an existing non-conforming first floor, and it's not going to be any greater than the current non-conformity. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And it's actually not sitting on top of the existing wall, so it's actually less non-conforming than the first floor.
I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it's sitting on the existing walls of the garage, but not the rear of the garage that's setting back.
Right. So the portions that are set back off the existing nonconformity and some that align with it, none of them are greater than.
Correct. And with it being an R8, the required setback for an R8 is 20 feet, and being the single family that's required to put in an R8 zone of the R3 is the 30-foot rear setback. So there's a little bit of controversy, or I shouldn't say controversy, of the difference in being an R8 and then being a single family, which is allowed in an R8. And back in 81, that variance was for that garage being the 8 foot off that rear setback.
Right. All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Ruddy.
Jeff, run that by me again, the R8 versus R3. I guess I got lost in the math for a second there. I just want to make sure I understand it.
In the R8 zoning district is actually a multiple family or cluster home, but in that, what's able to go in, you could do a single family in an R8, but being a single family in an R8, it's going into the R3 zoning district, which then it falls in the same as the R1, R2 being a 30-foot rear setback, and so it's a little bit more stringent with the requirements for the zoning.
So if it was multifamily, it would fit in under the R8 zoning requirements. Is that correct?
Correct, and it'd still be non-conforming because the variance was granted because then it would be a 20-foot rear setback. But back in 81, they gave the variance to put that rear of the garage at 8 foot.
All right, so no matter what, it's because of an existing non-conforming variance that was granted in 81, correct?
Correct.
Thank you, Jeff.
Anyone else on the board have questions for Mr. Zilke? Okay, who's going to speak on behalf of the petitioner?
Hi, I'm Larry Bryce. I'm the owner, and with my wife Janine, 545 West Brown.
Thank you. Go.
Yes, we're in the midst of a major remodel of the house, and we both need a home office, and this was the best location we thought to place the office.
Okay. Anything else you want us to know?
No, I think Jeff pretty much covered everything that detailed the plans. So if you have any other questions for me.
Okay, board members, any questions? Okay. All right. Thank you. Anyone from the public wish to speak on this appeal? I don't see any hands raised. Board members, anybody wish to make a motion? Mr. Lilly.
Yeah, in reference to appeal number 20-32, I move to approve both parts of the application. I know it's a unique situation, but the addition is going to be built well within the roof line of the current garage, so that you're not even going to be going straight up on the face of the existing garage. And I think it's a reasonable plan. And the appellate is doing a major renovation to the house, and I think it provides him the space that he needs for a home office. So I move to approve the application tied to the plan.
We have a second? Mr. Reddy? Seconded by Mr. Reddy. Any discussion? Mr. Reddy?
I think this is really special and unique circumstances here. We have an existing non-conforming home that was granted a variance in 1981. It sits within two zoning areas that complicate, in my opinion, what is required here. The homeowner has done every effort he can to build this addition on top of the existing nonconformity and not further intrude on an additional need for variance. So for those reasons alone, I think that this motion should be approved.
Any further discussion? Mr. Miller?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I also am in support of the motion that the house directly adjacent to the south, it's the garage of that house. So the house in the neighborhood that's most impacted, again, that's the garage size. So I think any impact to the neighborhood in terms of the bulk of this house would be absolutely minimal. So I am also in favor.
Anyone else? All right, seeing none, please call the roll.
Richard Lilly,
Yes.
Ron Reddy,
Yes.
Jason Canvasser,
Yes.
John Miller,
Yes.
Eric Morgenroth,
Yes.
Francis Rodriguez.
Yes.
All right, congratulations. You have your variances. Thank you. All right, moving on to our next appeal for the property at 593 South Glenhurst, appeal number 20-83, Mr. Zilke.
Jeff Zilke here to present case 20-33. Property known as 593 South Glenhurst requests the following variances to construct 2 basement window wells in the required side yard. Chapter 126, Article 4, Section 4.30C4, a zoning ordinance permits window wells to be allowed to project in the required side yard for a maximum of 3 feet measured from the inside of the window opening and shall not exceed 6 feet in width. The constructed is 8.33 feet in width. Therefore, a variance of 2.33 feet is being requested. That is the one where you see the red arrow. Variance B, Chapter 126, Article 4, Section 4.30C4 of the zoning ordinance permits window wells to be allowed and project in the required side yard for a maximum of 3 feet, measured from the inside of the window opening and shall not exceed 6 feet in width. The constructed is 7.02 feet in width. Therefore, a variance of 1.02 feet is being requested. This home was constructed in 2019, and they're here today looking for a variance to maintain the window wells that were constructed that are a little bit exceeding the allowed in the zoning. The second window well, you can kind of see in between the 2 air conditioners. And that generator that shows on this plan is not there, so that is not an issue of being in the required side yard. And should you have any questions?
So if we were to deny the variance tonight, I mean, is this something where and maybe this is a better question for the petitioner, but is this something that can just simply be filled in, or what has to happen?
The one on the left, there's a wider window, so one of the windows would be affected if it got filled in. The one to the right would be a little, I'm going to say a little easier to fill in and not as much impeding the window that's down below. There is a drawing that shows from the basement and kind of gives you a good idea if we can pull that drawing up, Bruce. And you can see the window well on the right. That is the wider of the 2. That has a triple wide window in there, and the one to the left, a little bit smaller window. And I guess you got any questions with seeing this plan?
And then just how did this end up happening? Is this something? Can you explain a little bit about how this ended up happening?
From my understanding, as the house was being constructed, it did get shifted over right from the get-go a little bit to push it out to on the house right to the 10-foot. And with the window wells being a little bit bigger, initially it was back behind the 10-foot, so then it would have been lot coverage. Which had no zoning issue. And then when it got shifted and they got pulled in, they were a little bit wider, and that's kind of in the translation where it when it was getting constructed there, it's kind of got in there. How it happened exactly, I don't know. I know it happened when the basement went in and the house got shifted forward a little bit towards the side street there.
Okay, Mr. Morgenroth.
So, Jeff, I have a bunch of questions. First is, are you saying one of these was on the plan, but the other one was not?
They were both on the plan. On the initial plan, one was further to the left towards the front of the house. And I don't know when the one got shifted to the right and the one in the back. But initially, they're both, the house would have been shifted closer down the street. So the side yard, those window wells would have been at the required 10-foot. And then when they brought it closer to the road, and it brought that wider window well over where the window wells are only allowed to be 6 foot in width into that side yard.
So the issue isn't whether or not they have two window wells to bring in natural light. The issue is they have two window wells that exceed the size allowed into the side yard setback.
Correct.
And so the quantity of window wells is not regulated. So if those two window wells were four window wells, all at 3 feet, would that be allowed?
Yeah, that would have been allowed. I know it kind of falls in the same thing with the dormers, like, you know, the 33% rule along the side yard, but there's not really a set standard, but I mean, potentially 4 window wells could be allowed on that side yard.
Is there a rule at how far apart they have to be approved?
It's around 3 feet, 2 to 3 feet. There's really no set standard, but basically almost say with a bay projection, there's got to be a bay window. It's almost the same thing with the window wells, having some kind of substantial distinction between the two.
Right.
And they couldn't be joined with a center post saying that they're individual.
And so did they have to cut the wall larger, or did they pour these the size that they are? Was it an afterthought, or was it done during the pouring of the basement?
It was done during the pouring of the basement.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Reddy.
Jeff, quick question for you. It looks like the petitioner is a builder. Is this the builder that actually constructed the home with this issue?
Correct. He's actually going to be the appellant speaking tonight.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, I know there's a couple of videos that we'll show with the car going down just to kind of, you see the area. I know we got a photo too, so.
Mr. Miller.
Yeah, how did the issue come up now? How did it get cited?
I think when the as-built came in, when the house was being finished up, and then it came to realize that it was shifted over and sticking further into the required side yard.
Okay, so was it discovered when the house was still under construction, or had it all been built up?
I'm gonna say it's all been built up.
Built up, yeah. Okay, so there was no chance during construction to mitigate this. It happened, because that house was shifted. It was all built, and then the error was discovered once it was completely constructed.
Correct.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Morgenroth.
Mr. Zilke, was the in-ground pool proposed? Could one speculate that this whole pool and patio and paver patio all impacted needing the house to shift over? Or do you think the shifting was an error on the engineer side?
I think with the pool, I think that had some impact on it for sure. I don't know for certain, but yeah, I'm going to say probably the pool would accommodate everything, and they're made a shift to it.
Okay, but they didn't request that shift prior to pouring the foundation.
No, the pool permit came in after the fact. That was when it was getting closer to being done, which typical houses are going. Somebody wants a pool, and I don't know where that shift came into play at that point.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Reddy.
One final question, Jeff. In your opinion, is there a feasible fix to this?
Is that a trick question? No, it would be a tough fix, I would think. Definitely not an easy one, but
fair enough. That's my opinion too. I just wanted to hear it from a professional.
The window wells themselves, what are they made out of? Is that poured concrete?
Yes.
Okay. So they'd have to drill that out and then pour smaller window wells if.
Yeah, and there's a limestone cap on top.
Okay. Anyone else from the board have any questions for Mr. Zilke? Okay, who on behalf of the petitioner is going to speak on this one?
Hi, my name is Rick Wyand. I'm with Hunter Roberts Homes, and I'm speaking on behalf of the homeowner. A couple things that are important to note is that, well, first of all, we build quite a few homes in the area, and this is a very rare situation for us. Over the years, one of the practices we've moved to is pouring full depth concrete walls on basement window wells. The metal window wells we find they leak easier and they're really not permanent. As to how this happened, the neighbor to the north had been having conversations with us and our client moving into the home. They asked us if we could put the driveway on the other side of the house on Midvale. They were trying to get us to keep the house further away from their location. So prior to start of construction, we requested our civil engineer move the house as far away from the northerly neighbor as possible. We presented an amended site plan to the city. Frankly, we missed it. Our civil engineer, who has done many, many homes, I would say hundreds of homes in the city, missed it. The plans were approved prior to start of construction. This is a very unusual situation. The city, we're very careful. Our architect is careful. Nathan is very careful. And had we been aware that this was happening, the picture that we showed of the lower level with the 3 windows, we certainly would have redesigned it to be symmetrical and had a better appearance. I have some videos that I've taken that I don't know if it's worth showing. Maybe you've all been past the property, but it's very hard to see the window wells. And there are a couple of, on the egress window, where there are a couple of U's that are going to be replaced that are not by Greater Detroit Landscape. We're requesting permission. I'm not sure of the legal terms. I'm not an attorney, but we're requesting a dimensional variance. I'm reading from our application, and I assume you've seen the information, but we think that this would not be in any way harmful to the neighboring properties. It would provide substantial justice to the owners of the property. As to from their point of view, they're the owners of the property now. This was not a self-created situation. The practical difficulty is because they're full concrete walls going down about 9 feet, it's a serious impact. And the reason I'm here is primarily to help the owners not diminish the view from the daylight and the view into that window well. I am not articulating this very well, but I hope you understand my point of view and their point of view. I'm respectfully asking for a granting of the variance. I would think that the city could attest to our diligence with regard to building here.
Did you say you had some videos that you wanted to play for us?
Well, it was showing, yes, if Jeff is able to pull them up. I did send them to the city. It's just giving you an idea of what it would look like. And I said Midvale in one of the window wells is right behind the white part of the house there. This is a video driving east on Midvale. In one video, I called it Middlebury. Sorry about that. So where the U's are, is one window well, and there's a couple of U's that are going to be replaced. The one's right in the middle. As you can see, they're a little bit thin, but one window well is behind there. The other's behind these arbs. And then here's coming in the other direction. Again, the same view. I wouldn't have gotten a ticket that day, would I? I was driving very slow. And then here's one walking, which I thought was appropriate to show. So there is a window well behind there that I just focused the camera on. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Board members, any questions? Mr. Morganroth? Oh, Mr. Johnson, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that during the plan review process, when our plan reviewers reviewed the plans, that the window wells were in compliance. It was during construction, when the house shifted towards a side street, they became non-compliant, which was then discovered when staff reviewed the as-built survey that was provided.
Thank you.
Can I waive or am I still speaking?
We can hear you, yes.
We can hear you, yeah. We haven't started the...
I need to add to that we did submit, prior to start of construction, a revised site plan that did show the window wells in the present location. We thought that we were in compliance. And I don't mean to disagree at all with Bruce.
And Rick, that's fine. Mr. Zilke can clarify that if needed. I'm just saying what my understanding was.
I agree that the house itself didn't change, but the location of the house moved over in part because of a request from the neighbor. It had nothing to do with the pool because the pool wasn't contemplated at that time. I don't believe. I'm not sure. I don't believe it was. But in any case, we did submit a site plan. This is the unfortunate part. Had it been noticed in review, we would have absolutely revised the size of the window well and the number of windows there. That's the unfortunate part of this, and the harm is probably being done to the homeowners as a result of these errors.
Mr. Chairperson, don't we need confirmation on whether or not this movement existed prior to showing the city that the house was shifting versus after? I think that would impact my decision.
I think it'd be helpful to know, who if we grant this variance, who are we bailing out? I certainly think that'd be helpful to know.
I think we're simply allowing continued use of an attractive basement to the homeowner. If we were to have to figure out to fix it, that's our responsibility, and we wouldn't do that. But we absolutely had an approved site plan.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't build without one. That would be disaster. I recall a house a few years ago on Lincoln that was torn down as a result of a incorrect location.
Yeah, there's plenty of examples where the board has made after built homes and additions been removed and demolished and constructed in conformity. I mean, one of the things I'm wrestling with right now is, this is seemingly nothing to do with the homeowners who, at least from walking by, appear to already be living in the house. It's a beautiful design, so nobody's disputing that. I don't think anybody's disputing the fact that it's really not something you see from the street. But the question is, in my mind, one of the questions, I have many questions. One of the questions in my mind is it self-created from the developer and the impact on the now living homeowners? But you can address it. And I know we have some other questions as well.
It was an inadvertent error. It was certainly not mindfully created. We didn't do this with any intent to circumvent any ordinance. I think our reputation in the city and with the city staff is a very good reputation. This was absolutely an inadvertent area, and I don't know where that falls within the allowance for variances. That we worked very hard to. I joke around with everybody at the city that we try and be Boy Scouts about this, and we try and observe. We work very, very hard to work within the ordinance in every case, and we've done a lot of work in the city. I'm a city resident. I'm fortunate to be able to build here, and the harm is being done at this point to the homeowner if the variance isn't granted. And I'm happy to answer any other questions.
No, I appreciate that. And I don't want anything I've said to be construed as implying that there's somehow a willful intent or any ill intent here.
Thank you.
And so I certainly recognize that. And likewise, I don't think this is a referendum on the homes you build in Birmingham or your reputation. But we do have a test that we have to look at, and intent is not necessarily one of those factors. But I guess with that being said, I know a number of board members have their hands up, so I'm going to let some others ask questions, starting with Mr. Morgenthau.
I'm sorry, what's the gentleman's name, since I can't see him on the screen?
Rick Wyand. Rick is fine.
Oh, yes, Rick, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
I think I know your wife. So I guess the bar that I'm trying to leap over is the concept that I would say that when I look at a requested variance, something on work that's already been done, I look at whether or not I would have approved it if it had come in front of us before the work was done. You know, if a roof line is 6 inches too tall, or someone's, half an inch into the setbacks, I look and see would there have been a reason for which I may have approved it, but the work's already done. The challenge here is that the foundation wasn't poured in the location, my understanding, in the location of the original plot plan. And so as it shifted over, these window wells now become, non-compliant. And I can tell you that since I've been on the board for probably 4 years, we've been very strict with these window wells, because I think everybody would love large window wells with large, amounts of light coming in. And I recognize, I don't think the corrugated steel window wells would have been feasible at this size. I think they all come pretty standard size with integrated stairs and whatnot. So in order to achieve these, it would have had to be poured in concrete. And I recognize, or, retaining, I recognize the challenge and cost related to potentially go back to what is code, but we don't really look at cost relative to our decisions. We look at, if we approve 2 oversized window wells in the side yard setback, are we creating a expectation for future homeowners that say, yeah, it was a mistake, but I expect you to grant it for us because you granted it for them. We have a different level, a greater perspective that we have to have over one particular situation. So I still am trying to wrap my head around the concept. So the neighbor said, let me finish, please. The neighbor said, please be a little bit more north for whatever reason. You guys said we're going to be good builders and good neighbors and do that. So then you had your engineer redraw the plot plan and you submitted it to the city and they approved it. Is that accurate?
Yes. We absolutely would not have ever come for a variance for something like this. We wouldn't have asked you for that. We would have narrowed the windows. It was, again, it was an inadvertent error.
Right.
We absolutely would not have asked for that type of variance.
Let me ask you.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So if we did determine you had to fix these, when I say fix, I mean shrink them or fill them in. We're just talking about likely taking off the cap, blocking in the space that isn't allowed, and then sealing it for prevention of leaks. Is there something more complex than I'm describing?
No, I mean, we would have to close in, cut it down below grade. So we would have to cut 1/2 or a portion of it, about 1/3 below grade, and then fill in inside the window well in front of that one of the 3 windows.
Right.
Yes, that would probably be what we would do, and that would create an undesirable situation from the view of the homeowner.
I understand completely. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Mr. Reddy.
So one of the codified reasons for which we can grant a dimensional variance is that special conditions and circumstances do not result from the actions of the applicant. So I'd like to know on the record, at what point in time did the homeowners know about this problem?
Within, I would probably say, several months after they moved into the home.
So this error was strictly on the part of your building, of you as the builder, as opposed to the actual homeowners. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yes. Yes.
Right. Fair enough. Thank you.
That's why I mentioned I'm here representing them, as opposed to representing us.
Anyone else from the board have any questions? All right, thank you. Now I'll turn to the public. Anybody from the public wish to speak on this appeal? Don't believe I see any hands raised. All right, thank you. Board members, does anybody wish to make a motion on this appeal? I think I saw Mr. Miller's hand first, so Mr. Miller.
Yeah, this is a tough one and an unusual one. My motion on what number are we?
Appeal 20-33.
Oh, I had the wrong page here. Thank you. 20-33, 593 South Glenhurst. My motion is to approve, and due to these very unusual circumstances, and this motion to approve should not be seen as remotely any kind of precedent being set. I believe here, one thing we look at is a problem due to unique circumstances of property. Here we have a problem that's really due to sequential events between the city and the builder that resulted in this situation. As the construction stands, I believe that the window wells are very nicely done. They're in harmony with the rest of the building that was constructed, the rest of the house, and certainly, in terms of doing justice to the neighborhood, what is there now is very reasonable. Again, if it wasn't for this sequence of events between the city and the builder and everyone trying to do the right thing, but it just ended out, in a situation where, again, the window wells moved a little too far to the south. I would think that the granting of this variance would be really unnecessarily burdensome in terms of that sequence of events. And certainly, in construction, things like this very, very rarely happen. Our city is very careful. I believe the builder here has been very careful. Again, they were cognizant of the neighbors. And because of this very unique circumstance, in this event only, I would move to grant a variance and not tied to the plans as submitted necessarily, but tied to the window wells as built.
Mr. Rodriguez?
Second.
We have a motion and second. Any discussion? Mr. Morganroth?
I'm having trouble with this. Obviously, this is not about blaming the homeowner or the complexity of what it will take to fix it and whatnot. I think back to a recent appeal from a gentleman who had a fence around his property that was 12 inches, 6 inches too tall. And he told us how he hired a fence guy. The fence guy put it in. He didn't know any different. And then, the fence guy put it in. And it wasn't until a neighbor mentioned the fence seemed high that we ultimately, it came in front of our board. And we said, it's not about blame. It's about the fact that the fence is too tall and we made him take the fence down. I have trouble, even though we can say on record that this shouldn't apply to everybody else. We have criteria for which we need to determine if something is, substantial justice is one thing, self-created. I mean, this is not about the homeowner, the person that built the home. It's somewhat self-created because it should have been caught that as the house moved, these were no longer to code. So I don't think I can support the motion as presented.
Mr. Rodriguez?
I am supporting the motion, and I do appreciate Mr. Morganroth's comments, and I am cognizant of the slippery slope and echo Mr. Miller's comments that this is no way, at least from my perspective, is to be seen as setting a precedent. In this case, we have by denying the variance, we have an innocent owner who really wasn't part of the equation or the process, and then moves in after the fact, and denying this variance is harming and punishing them for something that they were really not part of. I don't think that is, strict compliance here would allow the property for being used for the permitted purpose. And also with respect to this ordinance at issue in particular, it was discussed whether the petitioner could even add more window walls themselves. So long as they were meeting the ordinance, they could theoretically add more. So it just seems in this narrow set of facts, and particularly given that the owner itself would be punished here by actions that predated its really participation here, I am moved to support the motion.
Any other comments? I'm struggling with this one as well, and I'm trying to think whether or not there's an in-between solution. If we look at the issue of self-creation, if we look at the developer, then yeah, this is self-created. If we look at the homeowners, then I think there's a strong argument made that this is not self-created. To put the homeowners who are innocent in this whole thing through the construction of having essentially their windows in their basements ripped out, filled in, and have to deal with that, I'm not sure is fair as well. But I'm sure the developer will take care of that cost as well. And that's where I'm struggling. I'm trying to figure out again if there's some middle ground, but unless somebody sees something that I'm not, I think it's either, we grant the variance or, we don't. So I think I'm begrudgingly leaning towards supporting the motion with a kind of strong worded, don't let this happen again type view towards the developer. But any other comments, Mr. Morganroth?
Yeah, so I guess I want to point out that, I have a window well in my home that's twice the size of what this one is. Just mine happens to be either grandfathered in or in the setback. So I'm not questioning that the homeowner should be penalized necessarily. I think the issue is that if the error wasn't made, the homeowner couldn't have had it. And in the end, the homeowner isn't being penalized specifically because it's going to be at the cost of the builder to fix it. And I don't know, because I know that in other cities, this 3-foot requirement is similar. So what we don't know is it about the fencing around the space? Is it about the amount of water that comes off the roof and fills this area, and the risk of liability on the city on what happens when 2 10-foot wide window wells during a huge storm start filling up? I don't know the criteria by which it has to be 3 feet and no greater. I just don't think I'm in a position to second guess it and then realize the ramifications of what we're missing. My window well doesn't have a fence around it. My window well has a grate across the top that supports weight as people walk across it, and you don't even know it's there unless you stand over it. So I just don't know what I don't know, and to suggest that we should approve it without understanding the impact of why there is an ordinance that doesn't allow them to be more than 3 feet wide, whether or not it's a risk for people falling in, or like I said, stormwater, or the amount the drain inside that hole can support in excessive water, whatever it happens to be. I don't feel comfortable putting myself in a position to say they're fine the way they are because the ordinance doesn't allow for them.
That brings up, actually I have a clarification point for Mr. Johnson or Mr. Zilke. If they can come, one of them can come off mute. So the ordinance allows a projection of 3 feet into the side yard setback, correct?
Correct.
And these are 4 feet?
They're 4 feet. Now, keep in mind that the ordinance is allowing a 3-foot projection into the required side yard. If it was not projecting into the required side yard, it could come out more. The 3-foot projection is allowed into the required side or rear open space because that's the minimum required by the building code for emergency egress out of the basement. That's where the 3-foot comes from. But if the house was 11 feet from the side property line, then a 4-foot window well could be approved.
So if these window wells are 4 feet, and could they shrink them by a foot and be compliant instead of having to shrink the size of the length of the windows?
Can I interject? It's 3 feet on the interior. With it being a poured wall, the ordinance says you can 3 feet on the interior. And with a poured wall, there's the 10, and then with the stone out where it becomes the 4 foot, it's required to be 3 foot on the interior for the egress getting out. It could be a pre-made window well where it's a thin wall metal, which is on a lot of the houses around town, and a lot of people are pouring poured walls, which actually adds that extra foot, which throws it to the 4 foot. And it's actually 3 foot on the interior, but with it being a poured wall, then it goes to the 4 foot. The problem here tonight is the width of the window walls being the 9 foot and the 2.33 feet wider than what's allowed, because the maximum is 6 foot on the interior.
Gotcha. All right.
Jeff, do you know why that is? Why is there a limitation on width?
I'm not really sure why the 6 foot. I think some of it goes back to allowable projections. I don't know the total history behind it. I don't know if it's, hey, get out of the window well, and then here's a stairway, kind of more of an egress thing. I know the 3 foot is for the building code being the 3 foot necessary, the minimum to get egress getting out. The 6 foot, I'm assuming because it's the allowable projections there, it's kind of being limited to that.
Mr. Lilly, did I see your hand?
Yeah, you did, because I don't know where the depth of this window well came from, past the 3 feet, because it's really the issue of how wide it is, correct?
Right. Correct.
Yeah, okay. I just didn't want to get lost here.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that clarification. All right. Anything else from the board on this before we vote?
I guess one more question.
Yeah, Mr. Morgan-Ross.
So back to the image, Jeff or Bruce, is there enough space to close those in and not cover up the windows? To block them in on the ends?
The one to the right, there could be some room to close that in to make that one smaller.
We're measuring from the inside, not the outside. So if you were able to close it in based on, can you tell? That's from the outside. It's hard to tell, right?
zooming in. It's 9 foot on the interior. This one here where the red arrow's at, that would be a little more difficult because of the triple pane windows.
Right.
To close it in, you'd lose a window. The one on the right, it's a double pane window or double section window. That could be a little bit easier to reduce down without making an impact into the glass. But to what extent, I don't know 100% for sure.
So it's possible the one on the right could be adjusted with block or brick or something on the interior where it would meet code, and then we'd only really be giving a variance for one.
Correct.
Thank you.
I see the petitioner's hand up, and although we don't normally allow them to comment, I think if they have a limited comment relative to the ability to possibly mitigate the variance, I'm willing to allow that.
Yes, we could close in the one with the double windows. It's as limited as I can say it.
Okay,
that's fair.
Thank you.
And we do have a grill over the other window, not a fence around it.
Thank you.
Sorry, that's all I want to say.
All right. Mr. Miller, I don't know if that changes your motion or if you want to proceed as you've already moved.
I'd rather just proceed with the motion.
Fair enough. Then the motion is to approve the variances. Any last comments? Okay, please call the roll.
John Miller,
Yes.
Francis Rodriguez,
Yes.
Ron Reddy,
Yes.
Jason Canvasser,
Yes.
Richard Lilly,
Yes.
Eric Morganroth.
No.
All right, you have your variances.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. All right, moving to our final appeal tonight, 691 Oak, Appeal 20-34.
Jeff Zilke with the city, here to present case 20-34. Property known as 691 Oak requests the following variance to install a retractable awning. Chapter 126, Article 4, Section 4.30C5 of the zoning ordinance allows uncovered patios to project a maximum of a distance of 15 feet into the rear open space. The proposed is to have a retractable awning with a 15-foot projection into the rear open space. Therefore, a variance of 15 feet is being requested. The applicant is proposing to install a retractable awning in the area of the green area to cover the rear patio. And this home was constructed in 2019. And you got any questions? And then the photo next to it, there's a photo kind of giving you a depiction of what they're looking at installing. And you have any questions?
Mr. Morganroth?
So, Jeff, is this rule apply to permanent structures? And then, you know, we had this before with us. We had a client that somebody wanted to do a pergola, and we were talking about the roof is considered a solid surface even though it's open. And we talked about whether or not if we put it on casters and they could move it around. I'm just trying to understand, this ordinance applies to permanent structures, correct?
It does, and I know when it's out, it's actually a covering over the rear, so that's kind of with the ordinance saying you can't have a covered patio in the back. That's kind of why they're here for the variance tonight.
Right.
It is a temporary, it is retractable, but once it's out, it gets looked at as a surface covering that back patio being covered.
Right, but my neighbor has a 20-foot umbrella over their patio the entire summer, and I don't think they would allow to have a covered patio in the rear setback, but that umbrella is not against the ordinance, right?
Correct. I mean, it's furniture at that point.
Right.
And there's nothing that says that you can't have a umbrella table or some sort of that.
Right. Interesting. Okay. Thank you.
Oh.
Mr. Lilly, did you have a comment or question?
No, because it was addressed with the umbrella issue.
Okay.
I get lost on this with the retractable. It just doesn't make any sense to me, but that's all right.
Yeah. So, Mr. Zilke, it's the fact that it's attached to the building structure that is the difference here, correct?
Right. And then when it's when it's retracted out, it's actually covering the patio. So the way it's getting looked at in the zoning, it's covering the rear patio, and rear patios aren't allowed to be covered, projecting into the required rear setback, which the house is right at the 30 foot, and that 15 foot's allowed of the patio going into the required rear yard. And then when the awning's out, there's the covering over that rear patio, which is per the zoning ordinance, it's got to be uncovered.
Right, but if they could take this and put it, I think as Mr. Morgenroth indicated, on some kind of contraption where it's not attached to the building, and they can open and close it like an umbrella, then they don't need a variance, correct?
I'm going to say no, but I know going back to the question with the trellises and the pergolas and it being open, and if it's fixed to the ground, then it becomes a structure, then it's an accessory structure, then you got to be 10 feet away. There's a possibility of it. It's a question that's kind of a trick question to answer, but that could be a possibility. It could be looked at as an umbrella. Depends on how it gets done.
Okay. Mr. Miller.
Was there anything in the zoning that refers exactly to retractable awnings?
There's nothing in the zoning
I didn't see
about retractable awnings, but once it's out, then it's like, where do you distinguish it? It's covered the rear patio, even though, yes, it's retractable. Is it temporary? It's temporary when it's closed and out, but does it stay out all the time? I don't know if it withstands the weather, but it's just, as the ordinance states it, you can't have a covered patio. That's why they're here tonight, to get clarification and ask for that variance.
Mr. Morgenroth.
Jeff, do you know how much it protrudes into the rear setback when it's closed?
It's about an 8-inch box that's projecting out, which would be basically allowable overhang, can be up to 24 inches projecting in the rear yard. So there would be, once it's closed, there would be no violation at that point. It could be looked at as an overhang projecting out in the back.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Miller.
Yeah, I'm just curious how this came to the attention of the city. I mean, someone could just, the house was already built. You could just have a retractable awning attached to your house and not think of necessarily going to the city for a permit. How did this arrive at the city?
Gina, who's the homeowner with Hoyt, they're both builders. And I know having a conversation, she knows we had extensive conversations before they built the home. They maxed out the lot coverage, and it was just a question that she called up and asked because I know there's a health condition there.
Okay.
Is it what?
A health condition on her end of it with being in the sun.
Okay.
All right. Anything else from Mr. Zilke? All right. Thank you. Who's going to speak on behalf of the petitioner?
This is Gina Greer, owner with my husband, Hoyt Frericks. I don't know if well, first of all, I wanted to thank you all because I know that you volunteering your time on this board is, you've made a city very tasteful here, and we appreciate it. It's one of the reasons why we moved here. We are very conscientious. Like Jeff said, it's like we just, crossed our T's, dotted our I's, and made sure that part of us just said, let's just put it up and see if they notice it. But we don't really do things that way. The other thing that we do is, in building this house, it's an industrial house. It's very, very tastefully done. And the way we constructed it is, if it didn't exist before 1900, then, we didn't really want to do that kind of style. So everything that we did here, we tried to make it, there's a lot of steel, marble, brick, nothing modern like plastic or formica and so one of the things that made us think of an awning, considering that we can't have a roof, is that, in that old era, they did have awnings. And in fact, as we walk around town, we've seen a couple of townhouses that have awnings on them at the corner of Chester and Townsend. And beautiful townhomes, and they're up against the wall. And the nature of those things is you don't just leave them out like a roof, because, get damaged by heavy winds and everything. So it's kind of, you'd have to put them in if you want to protect your investment. They're not cheap. If we wanted to be cheap, we would get an umbrella that just sits in the middle, but we wanted to do it so that it was more conducive to the style of the home, being industrial, old era, and also safety. I've seen plenty of umbrellas tip over in heavy winds that forget to be taken down. And we think that having it fixed to the home increases the safety of it, number one. Number two, just the sheer coverage. Umbrellas, the way they are, the sun goes around them and you'd have to move it at all times. And the bigger the umbrella, the more difficult it is to move it. And I have had skincare concern. I'm under constant care so that I'm told by my doctor that I just, have to stay out of the sun. So I'm that person with the big hat, the sunscreen and all of that. So what happens is I just simply cannot use the backyard until the sun goes down, which is approximately 9:30, 10 o'clock. It's early, but we get sun here until like 7:30, coming in on an angle. So I don't get to go out there till late in the evening or early in the morning. And I'd really love to be able to appreciate it. The other thing to note is around the neighborhood, and I won't say where, I don't want to get anybody in trouble, but I have seen contraptions where people are jimmy rigging shade, like one of you suggested, where because it's either on casters or floating, or it can actually be lifted up and moved, that perhaps that's legal. But the one I'm seeing is there's really no other way to put it, but it's hideous. And I don't think that neighbors that could see into our backyard would want to see something like that, such as, 4 posts where they put fabric across and then they shimmy the fabric over and then shimmy it back. So there are ways that possibly we could get around it by jimmy rigging a larger umbrella or getting a bigger umbrella that's difficult. We just thought that this was the absolute most tasteful and minimal impact, where it would be out on sunny days and in the winter it'd be in the whole time. So I think I did a percentage, I think when I was talking to Jeff, where I probably wouldn't even be out more than 10% of the total year. I don't think I missed anything.
Well, thank you for that. Board members, any questions? Mr. Morganroth?
Gina, can you tell us, I'm sorry, I hope it was Gina, can you tell us how it's attached to the house?
It'd be bolted.
Huh?
It'd be bolted.
It'd be bolted on.
And do you think when you went to sell the house, you would leave it, or you think it's possible it'd be weathered at that point and you might take it down?
They could take it down if they wanted.
They could take it down if they wanted. I mean,
right.
They wouldn't.
But it's made of fabric, right? It's not like a bendable metal or anything like
that. There's like a metal, and it'll be black, very sleek and black, and match our window.
Right.
So we have wide black window frames, so it'd look just like that up above it, 8 inches. So that part is metal. And then when it opens up, it goes kind of like this. It opens up, and then the umbrella comes out like that. And then when it comes in, then it folds down in like that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sorry, it got dark in here.
Yes.
Any other questions from the board? So I have one, and I think this is one of those kind of. As far as I'm aware, this is the first time the board's dealing with a retractable awning situation. So this is, as far as I'm aware, the first time we've really had to consider this issue. And I'm sure there are people who are using these around the city of Birmingham without proper city approval, without the proper variances. One of the issues we have is I believe, in my opinion, we are essentially bound by the city's interpretation that this is considered a covered patio requiring a variance. but I understand that an umbrella may not be the most desirable thing, but is there something that you could do, or have you considered or explored alternatives where they're not physically bolted to your house?
We have umbrellas now.
We have umbrellas now, and we don't use them because they're ineffective. Have we considered other things? We looked at what they have at this house that I told you about, and that'd be absolute last resort, which, we might have to do. And I'll tell you, our neighbors will hate it. But if it ends up being something that we can put in so that I can sit on my patio, then I guess that's our last resort. And I feel sorry for the neighbors. Basically, you're asking me, frankly, I don't want to do that, and probably we won't, because we don't like putting hideous things outside our house. So I don't know. You know what, to tell you the truth, I was going to ask you guys. You all are experts in construction. So question number one is, why does Birmingham have such an adverse rule towards shade on the backyard? Number one, what is the legalese around it? I don't understand it. I could understand that if you don't put a firm roof, the purpose of it is, if you put a firm roof, now all of a sudden somebody's putting a patio up there or a room. I can see how that would happen. It's like, let's just put in a little kitchenette off the bedroom there. But with an awning, you can't do that, So if the purpose of it was to protect the integrity of the structural home, that it doesn't go upwards and violate in that way, the awning doesn't do that. Other than that, then my second question is, what are the suggestions? How can we get shade back there that has more coverage than, if you do get a 20-foot umbrella, the base of it is, very large to get something that's that large. And our patio it would pretty much put a big dent in our patio. Forget table back there.
No, and I appreciate those concerns. Unfortunately, we don't make law. We simply interpret it. So these are great questions that may or should be raised with the city council. But unfortunately, we don't get to make the law. And we don't get to do plans for you or come up with alternatives. We can certainly come up with some suggestions, but
Jason, can I just interject? I think the comment about the city doesn't have an issue with covered spaces. The issue is that you're going into the rear setback. Structure outside of the building envelope isn't allowed, and your patio is allowed into the rear setback, but it being covered can't be because it's perceived to be structure. So if your lot had a lot of
structure, 8 foot by 8 foot, and it's 8 inches by 8 inches. I'm sorry. How is it structured?
Yeah.
Well, that's what you're in front of us to determine.
Yeah, that's, again,
that's the part you're asking us to determine.
Within the roof overhang. With the roof overhang.
Right. Well, that's the city's interpretation. There are other avenues if you disagree with the way the city has interpreted the ordinance. But
hold on, there's one other thing. Is we made sure that we were 1 foot under our going into the easements all the way around. So the 8 inches doesn't even protrude beyond it's within it doesn't protrude beyond the building line. It's within the envelope.
The city acknowledged that the box that will hold it does not need a variance. It's only when it's open that it needs a variance. That they acknowledge that.
Why?
So again, that's the interpretation of the city. That's what we have. That's what we're bound to decide whether or not we should be granting you a variance. Board members, any other questions for the petitioner? Mr. Miller?
I have a question maybe for Bruce or Jeff, actually. Just a clarification. If the awning wasn't attached to the house, if it had a metal frame and it attached to that frame and was not attached to the house, was a few inches away, and that frame wasn't in the backyard setback, would that be allowed?
I think there are a lot of types of shade structures that you can purchase that are considered patio furniture that are not attached to the house. And I think that's what you're referring to. And if it's considered furniture, it's not considered structure, then the ordinance is not going to regulate that, or does not regulate it.
Oh, it has nothing to do with the large area being covered. If it was an umbrella that same size, it would be fine. It's just the fact that it's
not regulated, and I think that you're starting to see larger size umbrellas. I've seen some pretty large ones myself personally, and they are on patios and they're considered furniture.
So it's securing this to the structure that's really causing it to be to come outside of the zoning ordinance umbrella.
It's something that's mounted, to the house, and then when it's retracted, it's projecting from that. Like a roof overhang is allowed to project 24 inches into the required rear setback. I think in the case here, it's the ordinance is going to look at it. An uncovered patio is allowed to project 15 feet into the required rear setback, but a covered patio isn't. And I think whether that is just the covering is projecting from the home, or if it projects out and then has a couple posts for support, that are there. It is structure that's attached to the home.
Board members, any other questions for the petitioner? All right, seeing none, anybody from the public wish to comment on this appeal? I don't see any. Board members, does anybody wish to make a motion? Mr. Morganroth?
I'm going to make a motion. I would like to go on the record that I think the commission should look at this as a separate item and address it. I think if the structure that is permanent falls within the envelope in the ordinance, the temporary opening of it might be considered something temporary. For case number 20-34 for 691 Oak, I move to approve the variance as requested. I think that this variance is a unique situation. I think the client or the applicant has provided enough information for me that I feel like it would do substantial justice to them. I don't think it would do any disjustice or injustice to the neighbors, and that the client could put out 4 umbrellas that would be equal amount of coverage and be less attractive. I'd like to acknowledge that the awning presented will not go into the rear setback that would require a variance. It is within the ordinance as closed. And knowing that it's bolted but could be unattached, whether it be in the winter or when someone else buys the home, I believe that the substantial justice to the applicant allows me to believe that this is a temporary structure and not permanent. There's no footings being put in. There are no posts being put in. So for that reason, I think that I move to approve.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Lilly. All right, motion made, seconded to approve. Any discussion?
I agree with what Mr. Morganroth said. And I think this does need to be addressed as a separate issue at some point in time within the ordinance. But that's not the purpose here.
I am not going to approve the motion or support the motion, excuse me. I agree this does need to be addressed, and I don't think our ordinance takes into account retractable awnings. I'm not even sure this is a covered patio, but we are not here tonight on an interpretation issue. So I think I don't want to be second guessing the city in terms of whether or not this is or is not a covered patio. That would be left for an interpretation. But because the city has decided it's a covered patio, and I think the petitioner we've heard, they may not be as attractive, they may not be as functional, but there are options for things that qualify as furniture that don't require a variance. So I think there is a self-creation issue here, and I don't think there's a unique circumstance of the property that's been met here. So while I'm sympathetic and I understand why the petitioner is asking for this variance, I just don't think I can support it right now. Any further comment? Mr. Miller?
Yeah, I think this is a really tough one for all of us. But since the ordinance doesn't cover retractable awnings specifically, and as Mr. Morgenroth said, the permanent or more permanent piece when the awning is closed is not within the setback, but it's within the building envelope. I think there is a hook to hang an approval on this, but it's tough. And for me, it's about what seems reasonable here, and what the petitioner is asking does seem reasonable. I do understand that the city is trying to be very protective of the ordinance, and I understand their interpretation. But in this case, I will believe I would support the motion.
Any other comments? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Eric Morgenroth,
Yes.
Richard Lilly,
Yes.
John Miller,
Yes.
Francis Rodriguez,
Yes.
Ron Reddy,
Yes.
Jason Canvasser.
No. All right, you have your variance. Congratulations. That is our last appeal for the night. Mr. Johnson, do we have any other business to discuss?
We do not.
All right. Anybody from the public wish to comment on any items that were not on our agenda tonight? Not seeing any hands raised. Would anybody like to make a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Motion made by Mr. Morgenroth. I think it's seconded by Mr. Lilly. Can we all show hands on this one, Mr. Johnson?
We should call a roll on Zoom meetings on all motions.
Okay, let's call the roll.
Eric Morgenroth,
Yes.
Richard Lilly, John Miller,
Yes.
Francis Rodriguez,
Yes.
Ron Reddy,
Yes.
Jason Canvasser.
Yes. That concludes our meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Night.